Are you ready? I won the Senate. And that's historic, too. Because if you look at presidents in the White House, it's almost never happened where you won a seat. We now have 53 as opposed to 51. And we have 53 great senators in the U.S. Senate. We won. That's a tremendous victory. Nobody talks about that. That's a far greater victory than it is for the other side. Number two, I wasn't on the ballot.
Wait, you kept saying.
I said, look at me. I said, look at me.
Pretend I'm on the ballot.
But I have people, and you see the polls, how good they are. I have people that won't vote unless I'm on the ballot, okay? And I wasn't on the ballot.
And for more, I'm joined by the Hardball Roundtable, Beth Fooey, NBC News senior editor for politics, Aisha Moody Mills, Democratic strategist, and Evan Siegfried, Republican strategist. And a bit of news, I was just over at the board a minute ago going through the Democratic gains in the House, and I said that New Mexico 2nd District race had not yet been called. Literally 30 seconds after I finished that, the race was called. Xochitl Torres-Smith, the Democrat, NBC News has now declared is the apparent winner in New Mexico's 2nd District. That is a pickup for the Democrats. That gives them a net gain now. I'd said 37. It is 38. 38 for the Democrats in the House now that has transpired. Beth, in terms of the meaning of the midterm election, so it seems the question with these is always, because we've seen this a few times with presidents now, we saw Bill Clinton, we saw Barack Obama, they came in, they lost the House in their first midterm, they managed to win re-election. So the question about these midterms is always, does it leave a mark that will still be evident 2 years later in the presidential election? How do you feel about this one?
Well, who knows in 2 years? I mean, in Trump time, every day is a week and every week's a month, as we always say. I think in this case, yes, it's going to be, because unlike the last two presidents you mentioned, Obama and Clinton, this midterm happened in the midst of extraordinary economic growth, record low unemployment. The recovery's been in process for 9 years, and President Trump still lost fairly substantially in the House. So he could say that he wasn't on the ballot, but certainly absent any other major seismic event that could have caused this, what else was there? It was the conduct of the president in office, people uncomfortable, particularly those suburban voters, folks who are highly educated, who often have voted for Republicans in the past, who are just expressed with their feet in record numbers of voters going to the polls, showing their discomfort with this president, despite all the economic progress that have been made over many years. So certainly it is a bit of a scar on him.
Evan, you saw his claim there was, of course, in the midterm, in the home stretch of the campaign, Trump had been saying, I am on the ballot, I embrace this, treat me like it. Now he's walking away from it. But he did say to Chris Wallace there, he put the argument out that, hey, it will be different in a presidential election. When my name is on the ballot, there will be certain voters that show up for that don't for this. What do you put in that?
Well, first of all, he said, I won the Senate seconds before he said my name wasn't on the ballot. Yeah. So this is a little bit of a confusing statement on the president's part. I think that the president is this all-consuming entity in American politics right now. And while his name was not on the ballot, every voter was there who showed up and was thinking about him. We saw record turnout that we haven't seen since before women were able to even vote. We saw record turnout among younger voters, among African Americans, among Hispanic voters. Everybody turned out. Whether you like Donald Trump or not, he was actually good for civic participation. And I think his name was not on the ballot officially, but it was certainly on the minds of every voter. And to what Beth was saying with the economy, the House win percentage by Democrats is looking like it could be 8 to 9 points when all the votes are finally tallied. That is extraordinary. And when we have these great economic times, the thing that Republicans missed was that the majority of the country said they didn't feel like they were benefiting from it. It's like you go on Facebook and you see all these great pictures of a party and then you realize you're not invited. The Democrats won people 2-1 who said that their economic situation has not improved under this president.
Well, in terms of Democrats looking to sort of maintain this for 20, we saw Republicans in 2010 have a big, 63-seat gain in the House. If you took the House popular vote, then they won it big. 2012, Mitt Romney didn't just lose; he didn't on election night. It wasn't even that suspenseful as things turned out in 2012. So for Democrats to avoid that kind of whiplash in 2020, what do you think the biggest trap is for Democrats coming off a strong performance like this?
I think it's going to be two things. I think, one, the Democrats cannot get caught up in this infighting that's starting to surface around trying to dethrone Nancy Pelosi. It's completely raining on the big parade and the big win of picking up 38 seats in the House and taking back the majority. So that's one issue the Democrats need to control. The second thing is going to be about the candidate. The reason why we also saw record turnout, especially on the Democratic side, is because people were fired up about the folks that were running. And a lot of those folks didn't exactly win, but because they were running 2020, they brought more people out. And so is 2020 going to produce the same kind of enthusiasm and galvanize the hopes and the dreams and the minds of all these young people, all these people of color, all these progressives, all these women in the suburbs and beyond who came out this time? That's going to be the trick and the question. And I think it's going to matter who actually the nominee is in 2020.
Speaking of Nancy Pelosi, you just set that one up very nicely, because today 16 Democrats signed a letter saying they will vote to oppose Nancy Pelosi for House Speaker. They write, quote, "We promise to change the status quo, and we intend to deliver on that promise." Now, currently, counting the races that have been called, Democrats will have 233 seats in the upcoming Congress. Remember, there are a couple still not called yet. Pelosi will need 218 votes, the absolute majority, on the House floor in order to win the Speaker's gavel. She can lose only about 15 votes right now by this math. And while that letter has 16 names, one of the signees on it, Ben McAdams of Utah, he's in a race that is yet to be called. He may lose this race. So it's a bit of a fluid situation. But it's interesting, Aisha, you just said you don't think Democrats should depose Nancy Pelosi. A lot of these Democrats, a lot of the messages in the campaign this fall was, "I will not vote for Nancy Pelosi. It's time for the party to move forward." Why do you feel so strongly about that?
Here's the thing, and this is really frustrating me. Nancy Pelosi has been the most successful Speaker of the House in 100 years. What this woman accomplished during her career, I mean, the list is long in terms of all the legislation that she passed. She is deft and a maneuverer. If there were someone else who could possibly whip and navigate the work that needs to be done in Washington right now, then maybe there'd be an alternative. These folks are just saying, not Nancy, but we don't have anybody else. And that's insulting. And I think that it's also sexist. So and the last thing I'll say is that it really frustrates me that we have this very, very, very right-wing faction of the Democratic Party that is trying to dethrone her. I don't think that that's the future. I think that's going backwards.
When you say a right-wing, what does a right-wing faction look like?
The folks who are against her are extremely conservative. They are not moving forward with what the Democratic Party says it's wanted. The enthusiasm that I talked about of the voters who came out because they believed in something hopeful around progressive ideals. And so to then regress back into this blue dog mentality, I don't think is the way forward. And I don't think that those are the people who are going to excite folks for 2020. I do not think it's a winning strategy.
And yet the ironic thing is that Nancy Pelosi is so good at managing those different factions. I mean, that's what she's been good at throughout this entire time as the Democratic leader, because the factions are going to exist. They've existed before. They're going to exist in the future. She knows how to work with these groups, get them all united behind a message, behind a strategy. That is something that these Democrats very much need going into this confrontational posture with President Trump. He's a very difficult guy to run against or to oppose. Pelosi has the experience and has the know-how to do so. And yet there is a need for some new leadership, and she has even indicated that she would consider herself a transitional figure.
That's the knock you hear on her from some Democrats. And I covered the House 10 years ago, and I remember hearing it then. Yeah. It was that Nancy Pelosi was a shrewd inside player, but one of the things she understood was self-protection, and that meant insulating yourself from anyone who might be a long-term threat to your leadership. And we're sitting here in 2018 saying, Democrats, you got Hoyer who's 79, Pelosi who's 78, Clyburn who's 78. Is that a consequence of Nancy Pelosi being a skilled inside player and protecting herself?
Yeah, there's no bench.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no bench.
Listen, you don't even have a bench. You have a stool at this point for the Democratic Party. The other thing that is really happening here is that the American people 2 weeks ago went out and voted because they were sick and tired of the chaos in Washington. They want Congress to function and actually get results for the American people. And when you start right out of the gate having a leadership fight, which is turning over into drama and infighting, that's not healthy. It's also not healthy when you have incoming members having sit-in protests and acting like activists now in Pelosi's office. They have now been elected. They have been chosen to govern. They are now part of the government which they are protesting, and they need to put on their adult pants and actually say, we are here to govern. If they don't do that and continue on this righteous crusade, I see the Democratic Party moving further left and actually where the Republican Party was in 2010. We got the Tea Party. They felt that they were entirely righteous in their own cause, and look at the dysfunction that has come
Brinksmanship at 2011. You had Newt Gingrich in 1995, probably helped Bill Clinton get reelected in 1990. Oh, the variable. If Congress changes hands, there is a new variable there, obviously, in D.C. The Roundtable staying with us. Up next, these three will tell me something I don't know. Very easy job. You're watching Hardball.